Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Stellantis because things are not going well for the brands under the Stellantis umbrella here in the US market. Before we get into this video though, as always, if you're going to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And with that being said, let's get right into it. Stellantis represents several brands here in the US market, but there are four of which that people talk about the most: Dodge, Ram, Jeep, and Chrysler. And the reason why people talk about these four brands the most is what you will typically see is a franchise dealer will have all four of those brands under one roof. And so it is typically pretty easy to see if those four brands are doing well or not, because if that dealership is doing well or not, it kind of showcases what is happening. And this is what I want to talk about in today's video, is what is happening with these four brands and just Stellantis in general. And this is coming from the perspective of someone who just studies trends within the auto market and then also happens to review cars for a living. And so I want to combine the study of market trends with what I see in the real world to kind of try to come to a conclusion with what is happening with Stellantis here in the US market, because not to be too over the top, but it really does not look good for Stellantis currently. So let's start with talking about these four major brands and their contribution to the US auto market. So starting with Ram, right? They mostly focus on pickup trucks. You've got the 1500 series, and then you have the HD series, and then they also do sell cargo vans as well, but that's kind of more on the commercial side of things. And then you have the Dodge brand, which historically has been known for muscle cars, but it looks like that's kind of on its way out, because 2023 was the last year where you could get V8 powered Dodges, well, at least that we know of up to this point. And then, Dodge has also, kind of dabbled in SUVs here and there. The Durango, for example. We've got the new Dodge Hornet as well. And then you have Chrysler, which was, historically a more luxury-based brand. And, as of late, it's kind of just been a minivan brand, because yes, Chrysler does still sell the 300, and the 300 actually does pretty well, in some areas in the US, but really it's just the Pacifica that is the main part of the Chrysler brand. And then finally, you have Jeep, the off-road adventure brand, the SUV brand that just sells a bunch of all of its SUVs, or at least it used to sell a bunch of all of its SUVs. Now, there are other brands under the Stellantis umbrella, like, Maserati and Alfa Romeo, for example. And just to quickly touch base on both of those brands, Alfa Romeo is, a more affordable sport luxury brand. And, they came back to the US market and they initially did okay, didn't get massive volume numbers, but, they were existing. And now it seems like they're not quite on their way out, but they're definitely not doing all that well right now. I mean, there are some, Alfa Romeo dealers, franchise dealers, that have just closed their doors. Like, they've gotten rid of the Alfa Romeo franchise. So it kind of shows the overall health of that brand. And then when it comes to Maserati, they are trying to kind of reinvent themselves, but it's been kind of a struggle because their cars have always been pretty expensive, but now they're extremely expensive. The new Gran Turismo is like a $200,000, $300,000 car, depending on how you spec it out. The MC20 is a $300,000+ car. And so they have really cool cars, but they're also really expensive, and they're kind of struggling to convince buyers that are looking at cars at those price points to buy from their brand, as opposed to buying from the traditional brands they buy from, like Lamborghini, Porsche, Ferrari, all of that. So that's that part of it. Now, back to the bread and butter of Stellantis here in the US market: Dodge, Ram, Jeep, and Chrysler. And here is what, the facts say. All three of these brands have a day supply number of over 120 days in the US market. That means that it would take at least 120 days for dealers with these brands to sell off all their inventory. And Dodge actually has even more than that. It's almost 200 days in terms of their day supply number. Now, I think that the Dodge day supply number is kind of a little bit higher than reality. Basically, what it looks like is there was just this final rush to get out all of the rest of the last call editions with the Chargers and the Challengers, and they might have overbuilt compared to what actual demand is for those final edition cars, which ultimately I don't think is necessarily going to be a bad thing, because I do think that the dealers will be able to eventually find buyers for these cars because they're not going to be made anymore. They're super iconic. So Dodge's day supply number, I think, is a little bit higher than what we're going to see. I think that's definitely going to come down in the near future. But as for the other brands, all being over 120 days, that is 2 times the day supply number for the car industry, and it's happening for a number of reasons. So if we start with Chrysler again, it's a minivan brand, and the Pacifica I think is actually a really good minivan, but the problem is the Pacifica doesn't meet the needs for what a lot of minivan buyers are looking for. And the biggest need of what minivan buyers are currently looking for is affordability and reliability. Now, the Pacifica has kind of gone for more of the luxury minivan route, right? Most of the Pacificas I see at dealerships are crazy loaded up $60,000 minivans. And so the affordability part's not there. And then, you know, Chrysler hasn't exactly been known for its reliability, especially when you compare it to the other minivan automakers like Honda and Toyota that have been, you know, known to last for a long time. Now, those do have their own reliability things, but again, not nearly, again, if you look at the repair, the repair statistics, not nearly as bad as the Pacifica. So I think that's why Chrysler's kind of struggling on that front. And then the 300, it's just such an old car at this point. And so it makes sense as to why they aren't selling that many of those. Now, diving into the Ram brand, it's, a few things, but first off, it's just pricing. They've priced themselves out of the market. Their trucks are way too expensive. I just reviewed a Rebel GT today, and it's stickered for $77,000. That is more than what a TRX stickered for when it was released back in 2021. Ram went from being a value truck brand to being an expensive truck brand. And don't get me wrong, their trucks are nice, but they also haven't redesigned their trucks since the 2019 model year. And so they're asking a ton of extra money for a product that hasn't been redesigned in quite some time. So the trucks are just too expensive, and then you have capability issues. The 3500 is great. The 2500 does not have nearly enough payload. I just reviewed a 2500 today that only had 1,600 pounds of payload for an HD truck. So the capability with their 2500 series truck is not great, and it makes sense as to why 2500s are just rotting on Ram dealership lots. And so it just comes down to pricing with that brand. And then when it comes to Jeep, similar thing. Jeep has focused so heavily on trying to become a, basically Land Rover brand, but at higher volume amounts in the US market. And so they've just priced themselves out of the market with their core buyers. The people that buy Jeeps, like there are some people that want luxury, but most of the people that buy Jeeps, they want off-road capability, affordability, and reliability. Jeep still offers the off-road capability. They no longer offer the affordability, and because of all the crazy tech they've put into the modern Wrangler and into the Grand Cherokee, the reliability is not the worst on the planet, but it's definitely not what it used to be. Now, despite everything that I just said, that is not enough to completely derail these brands, because there are other brands here in the US market that have similar issues as to what Stellantis is, currently suffering from. But there is another issue thrown into the mix that has been happening for roughly the last 6 months that I think is kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back type situation. And that issue is build quality. Now, this issue does affect other automakers, like any, automaker that has cars that are built here in the US has had some level of build quality issues. There are some outliers like BMW, for example. I've noticed that it doesn't matter if those BMWs are built here in the US or if they're built over in Europe. It seems like the build quality in all modern BMWs is really good. But outside of, BMW and some other small examples, it seems like most cars built here in the US just don't have the best build quality. It seems like Stellantis vehicles built here in the US have the absolute worst build quality. And I'm just saying this as the honest truth based on what I have seen anecdotally and what people have sent in to me in terms of what they see at dealership lots and what they've basically experienced when they've taken delivery of some Stellantis product. And what I mean by bad build quality is parts just not put on properly onto the vehicles. And the vehicles being delivered with damage. Now, there is damage that happens during transport, like that is definitely a thing, but there are certain items that definitely weren't damaged in transport. Like it's pretty obvious that they were most likely damaged in the factory, and then they were still installed. Like a really good example is, on the infotainment system and on the gauge cluster with vehicles, right? You've got the, layer on the top, right? That's kind of the protective layer. Well, I've seen vehicles where it's been completely scratched, like all over. And so, yeah, you could say this might be something that would happen in transport, but it's more likely that it got scratched somewhere in production, and the quality control team just said, "Yep, that's okay. Give it a check on, and ship it off." And there are other bigger problems that I have seen, massive panel gaps, and again, like I said, just pieces on the exterior, the interior, just not put together all that well, and then sometimes the really funny situation where a vehicle just has the wrong equipment inside of it, where it has like the wrong type of seat or something like that. That also happens. But again, this is not just a Stellantis thing. It does happen to other automakers. Like I've seen it with Ford, I've seen it with General Motors, I've seen it with Toyota as well, with some of the cars that Toyota has built here in the US. But it seems like Stellantis has been hit the hardest. And, some of these other automakers, they don't have the other things going against them. Like you look at General Motors, for example, and it's like, yeah, they have had some quality issues with vehicles, but they also have kept their pricing at a more reasonable amount compared to what you have with the Stellantis brands. And so they don't have as much stacked against them. And so for all of these reasons that I mentioned in today's video, this is why Stellantis, from my perspective, is currently struggling. And so if Stellantis wants to do better in the US market, well, they got to figure out manufacturing. Like that is the most important thing with vehicles. With how expensive modern vehicles are, they need to be built right. There has to be some level of good build quality. So that needs to become a huge focus with every single brand under the Stellantis umbrella, especially Dodge, Ram, Jeep, Chrysler, from what I have seen in my life. And then the next thing, it just comes down to pricing. I see Dodge, Ram, Jeep, Chrysler dealers discounting the absolute crap out of vehicles. Like they are losing massive amounts of money on these vehicles to sell them if they sell them based on their pricing, and they still are not selling them. I literally have had salespeople from these dealers tell me that they haven't sold any new cars for months, that they're only selling used cars because nobody's interested in the new stuff. And what they tell me is basically what I've said in this video. Pricing needs to come down. It is way too high, especially for the, again, quality that we've seen with the product recently. And then the next thing is just the brand confusion that's happened, right? I understand that there's a lot of emissions things that are happening over the next few years that the federal government has released. But at the same time, brands like Dodge, right? They have been known for certain things. And so if the brand is no longer producing product that it's known for, having a V8 under the hood with lots of power, then don't expect the customers to stay loyal to the brand. You might have some diehard people that'll stay with the brand, but other people, they might not care, and they'll just go to whatever other automaker is offering that. And I know there could be the argument made that, well, all the automakers are going to have small displacement engines or electric, powertrains, and so we're just ahead of the curve. And, fair enough, but at the same time, these other brands, their identity isn't as tied to internal combustion engines as some of the brands under the Stellantis umbrella, especially V8 internal combustion engines. And so I know this video is kind of all over the place, but hopefully that somewhat explains the Stellantis situation. Again, this is just from my perspective, so let me know what you guys think could be done to help out these brands under the Stellantis umbrella, because again, the numbers tell the story. They have the biggest day supply number, and if you look at their sales figures, sales have also decreased. Like every other automaker is pretty much up year over year when it comes to sales, and all of these Stellantis brands are down year over year when it comes to sales. And so if they have more inventory and fewer sales happening in a year where everyone else has more sales happening, then they're probably not doing something right. Anyways, I'll see you.